The world seems new with a new sacredness. The power of the light is in all things. Through our very physical senses we touch the light which is divinity. It lies about us, and in us. As we have variations round the music note or music theme or motif, so is the world an almost infinite number of variations upon the theme of the universal light. It is a symphony of light. It is also a symphony of sound, and no less the symphony of silence. It is a symphony of color and of form. And there are those who, hearing the archetypal symphony, seek to mellow the harsh notes and cruder colors and forms of ignorance so that the world orchestra, composed of all manifested life as the musicians, make, under the baton, the mighty rod of power of the world's supreme conductor, make the music glorious, the archetype one with the actual. The process of evolution is a process of the individualization of light on the way to re-universalization on the plane of self-consciousness. Music is light. Fire is light. The arts and the sciences are light in evolution growing under the laws of light. The scriptures tell us of the light. There is a great gospel of the light, whence comes every faith, and to proclaim which comes every Savior. Light is right. Darkness is wrong. We grow towards the light as do the trees and flowers. I see our Lord the Sun in each of us. Is the heart the sun of our body world? Does the blood reflect his rays? Are not all things light terms, light formulae? What is Nirvana? The light divine. I am touching, perhaps only for a moment, its lowest reaches, its densest layers. All I have written is but of the light divine in its lowest nirvanic aspect. I cannot conceive down here even this glory, but it leaves in me as I return to earth the new perception of reality. I have taken a step nearer to the real. There is a greater comradeship in the world than I had thought, a deeper identity, the more glorious origin, the more glorious way, and the more glorious goal. Round me everywhere and at all times are God's sunshine messengers. Every color speaks his word and his voice. Every form breathes his purpose. I, dust in the sunshine, yet am part of it, and looking upward to the sun I see the sign of my own divinity, and the embodied promise of my ultimate achievement. As is our Lord the Sun, so shall we all be, for he has willed it so. Light is language, thought, vesture and vehicle. A flash of light conveys for us down here a whole philosophy. The whole of this pitifully feeble amount of nirvanic experience was doubtless within a single flash of nirvanic light penetrating my being, or rather perhaps stirring at last from age-long dormancy within me. Light is the will of the sun, the wisdom of the sun, the love of the sun. It is written in books that Nirvana is bliss. Even from that outermost region, at the frontiers, I know Nirvana to be infinitely more. Just one glimpse and all things seem to be made new, within me and without me. I remain, yet am wholly changed, and everything round me seems to be undergoing a process of revaluation. Even now, everything means far more than before. Every object, in every kingdom, seems in one way far more a shadow of reality than a reality, for I perceive how feeble and inadequate must be all reflections of the light. I did not know before that they were so feeble. And yet, equally true is it that every object is far more real, far less of a shadow of reality, than I had thought. I see the prism opportunity of form, and I perceive the shadows. I see the unfolding splendor of the light eternal, and I perceive the radial. All other worlds are shadow worlds compared with this nirvanic world, and yet they are more real worlds because of this nirvanic world, for I now perceive the seal of God's purpose set upon all things, and I must reverence all things in far deeper measure than before. Philosophers talk of pure being. I seem to be able to sense what pure being must be, not because I have contacted it, but because I have contacted that which is less short of pure being than all other consciousness states I have so far experienced. That present, speaking as a child in this new kingdom, Nirvana to me is pure life, life which is light. Not that color has faded into this light. Color remains, but the spectrum of Nirvana is a glorification indescribable of the color spectrum of the planes below. It is more light than color. Indeed, only as I've grown a little accustomed to the light, and my sensitiveness increases, beginning to adapt itself to its new environment, do I begin to perceive that within nirvanic light are marvelous manifestations of color apotheoses, of color relationships, schemes and interactions. For the moment, the sense of evolution is lost in the blinding glory of the light. As I become more at home than at home one never thinks to own until one enters at its doors, I shall realize, as I do not yet realize, that the eternal truth remains true, and becomes more true, that to enter the sunlight, which is another way of saying, to love God, there is only one road, the service of that light which lighteth every man. Thus, with a new power which I shall learn to use, do I seem to enter upon a deeper service. We are children of the sun, sparks of this glorious sunlight. I look up into the sky and I see my King. Sun worshippers worship more truly, perhaps, than they know. I, infinitesimal, ignorant and feeble, yes, even I, am a servant of the sun. As he shines upon the whole universe, so must I shine upon my world. I must be sunshine, even as he is sunshine. It is sometimes said that we cannot see God. I think I can't see him in part, and know something of his sublimity, as I look upon the sun. Even with my physical eyes, I know something of his glory, and the whole world around me is his glory in manifestation. But looking upon him from the nirvanic world, I know far, far more. Another veil is lifted, and a fuller glory shines upon me. No words can express my new sense of him. That is, and must be, the mystery beyond words, beyond feeling, beyond even thought. Indeed, I must not even make the attempt. It is little short of blasphemy. But in the first epistle general of St. John, beginning at the 5th verse of the 1st chapter, it is written, "This then is the message which we have heard of him, and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him, and walk in darkness, we lie, and do not the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another." And again in the 2nd chapter of the same epistle, beginning at the 9th verse, "He that saith he is in the light, and hateth his brother, is in darkness even until now. He that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there is none occasion of stumbling in him. A simple message, but profoundly true. In him is no darkness at all, neither shadow of turning. Upon us all shines his light perpetual. May we ever dwell in the light through the service of our brethren. Chapter I. The first readjustment I compared man's gradual progress in self-knowledge to his gradual decipherment of the nature and meaning of the sunshine which reaches him as light and heat indiscernibly intermingled. Myers. Human Personality and the Survival of Bodily Death. It is curious how, as the days pass, one becomes increasingly conscious of the readjustment to one's surroundings, as well as of a perpetual contact with the non-physical. My relationships with other things have altered. It may be that the Buddhic unity has itself become intensified, for more of reverence seems due to everything, to inanimate as much as to animate objects. Indeed, I see clearly that there is nothing which is inanimate. All is animate with sunlight. All is alive with sun sound, with sun form. Even the minutest microcosm is a perfect macrocosm in miniature, the pebble on the beach, the speck of dust, the least intimate insect. God is not original. Having made his pattern, he never departs from it. Having chosen his pathway, he never diverges from it. This perception of the wonderful sameness of all things, which means that in essence all things are vibrant with infinite potentiality, causes an interesting and significant physical reaction to the outer world. I must lift things more carefully, deliberately. I must touch things with more refinement in the touch. I must use things with a greater sense of the purpose to which there is no exaggeration in the statement they are dedicated. Nothing slipshod or careless is tolerable. Let knowledge grow from more to more, but more of reverence in us dwell, that mind and soul, according well, may make one music as before, but vaster. There is much profound truth in these lines. Through increased reverence the music does become vaster. I perceive divinity in the fountain pen with which I write these words. It seems unfair to the pen, indeed untrue to the essential being of the pen, if I do not try to write carefully and neatly. The pen suffers other than physically if ill-treated. If used less reverently than it might be used. I seem to be under the necessity of educating, of cooperating with my surroundings all the time, largely by my general attitude, but in no small measure by my more overt comradeship with the things that constitute them. My office tools depend upon me, look up to me. All this may be the intensification of the Buddhic principle, but it is more than this. Am I getting nearer to the truth when I suggest that the unity of Buddhi is more an outward, forthgoing process, while the unity of Nirvana is more an inward, indrawing process? Do I at the Buddhic stage perceive my oneness with the world, and at the Nirvanic stage perceive the potentiality of all things within me? I think there is something of this kind. For our Lord the Sun seems at the Nirvanic stage to become the center of my being. On further contemplation, it seems as if at the Buddhic stage one goes out to find the unity, while at the Nirvanic stage one begins to realize it everywhere. At the Buddhic stage one travels from center to circumference, finding the center as much at the circumference as at the center, if you understand what I am trying to convey. At the Nirvanic stage, that which has been two and yet one in two, becomes one. All is center. and one is on the verge of the conception that under a certain mode of consciousness the center need have no circumference, for all is within its center. We draw circumferences just as we draw double lines for easier writing, but we do not need them, and Nirvana is the state of doing without them. At the Buddhic stage there is more of realization. At the Nirvanic stage there is more of being. As I have already written, the sun seems to be my king, and I realize that down here I must be a sun, the sun of my world, as he is the sun of his system. In him is the source of all life. In me, too, is the source of all life, because I am in him, and of his being. His rays pervade worlds. Do not mind, however feebly, pervade the world. I am an infinity in the becoming because I am infinity in essence. Nothing is lacking in my nature to that stupendous end. The word end is, of course, absurd. I am light even as he is light. The nirvanic consciousness seems to produce a cognition of oneself as a throbbing, pulsating energy or power nucleus, slowly but surely expanding, extending its kingdom far and wide, and itself becoming more and more radiant as its frontiers are pushed forward into space. I can't conceive that in the infinitely distant future my body shall be as the sun and my kingdom the universe. I am brought face to face with my potentiality, and with its inevitable growth into power. It is a marvelous and stupendous grandeur, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, in the becoming. I enter my sanctum sanctorum. I enter the essence of my being. I perceive a burning, blinding sun, the miniature of the sun himself. It seems to me also that I am in constant contact with all outside me. This is probably a way of putting the fact that I am conscious on the plane of universal consciousness, on which time and space are non-existent. An act of consciousness, and I contact whatever I desire to contact. It is not a question of going anywhere, of projection, but rather of tuning, and not even of tuning, but rather of attending. The act of attention makes the contact. Of course, I am only at the very beginning of this, and I express myself badly and uncertainly, because I am merely a child, and use child language to express unfamiliar relationships and to describe conditions about which I know next to nothing. I am just like a baby trying to describe all it met on its first journey into the streets of the town, or the roads and lanes of the countryside. I have received impressions, but these filter through, have indeed been contacted by undeveloped organs. Still, perhaps you sense the truth within the halting picture. William James in one of his books has said that the nightingale of life's eternal meaning is forever singing in men's hearts. From the standpoint of the nirvanic consciousness I realize that this is profoundly true, but it means far more than probably he intended it to mean. The eternal meaning of life is indeed forever singing in men's hearts, but it is not, I think, until Buddhic, and later nirvanic, consciousness is opened that one begins to hear the song, or at any rate to begin to understand it. When one does begin to hear it in one's own heart, simultaneously one seems to hear it in the hearts of all things, even though it sings as yet to ears that are deaf. And then one knows that there is but one great song of life echoed in the hearts of men and things, be its variations infinite. Such knowledge is it that brings one to a realization of the nature of universal consciousness. Hearing the song of life in harmony of glorious light and color in its nirvanic manifestation, one hears the sound of its eternal meaning in all things, and it is but an act of consciousness to hear its no in any particular individuality, and thus to contact that individuality intimately. That is, then, but a matter of tuning in onto the wavelength required. The wireless apparatus is installed, even though very far from running smoothly, and I seem able to tune into all manner of things everywhere, to persons, to friends, to events, even though I may only rarely be able to hear accurately. I see the dead living on in other bodies, and with us all the time. I see the living in other parts of the world as near to me as those in physical propinquity. I can't draw the whole world into me, and thus annihilate time and space. How much more than this world, so far as regards its sub-nirvanic states, I may be able thus to draw in, I do not know. But I am just now beginning to perceive that the unfolding of nirvanic consciousness brings one into touch with other worlds than this earth of ours. Certain planets, of course, may be contacted comparatively easily without nirvanic consciousness, but its unfoldment makes possible journeys farther afield, for on the nirvanic plane infinitely more of our universe begins to be within reach. I have not yet journeyed far afield, but I find myself in touch with influences from distant places, the nature of which is for the time being more than strange. There are mighty influences at work among us, down here in our world, influences from far away, from other universes indeed as well as from other planets. I can say no more at the moment, for all is vague. But it is very intriguing. How strange one feels in one's new world, with its almost illimitable vistas and marvelous scenery, peopled with wonderful presences, linking together even universes within a stupendous cosmos. It is a wonder that the physical brain can stand even the feeblest reflection of it all, for it is also completely outside all previous experience. Clearly the physical brain could not stand the strain but for the previous Buddhic experience, which reinforced the brain, stamped it with unity, enlarged its capacity, that it might gradually become ready for the further expansion. That nirvanic note would have been shattering but for the tuning into Buddhic contact achieved. How true it is that language in this case conceals thought and meaning. I need nirvanic language to convey the sense of nirvanic things, and my hearers need nirvanic understanding. How impossible to convey the sense of moreness in a medium which stops short at that very moreness. Still, perhaps you have an impression of that wondrous moreness, though until you too can begin to see, my words must often seem confused and even muddled. As Myers has said so beautifully, oh, could I tell, ye surely would believe it. Oh, could I only say what I have seen? How should I tell, or how can ye receive it? How? Till he print it you where I have been. The more one immerses oneself in even this lowest layer of nirvanic consciousness, the greater becomes the clarification of consciousness on the lower planes. It is like a fresh, pure stream of energy flowing through the great channels of life and vivifying the outlook at every stage. We are continually working under the law of readjustment, and each expansion of consciousness involves a further readjustment to the eternal reality. Purer and purer becomes the refracting medium as kingdom after kingdom of consciousness is conquered, till at last the light of the Real shines through undimmed, or as nearly undimmed as is possible in the universe of the relative. One of the most striking examples of this clarification is in the discovery that it is far more possible definitely to know God than I had supposed. Does one attain a vision of God, of the Creator, in a form capable of being understood by human consciousness? I seem to have perceived God, not as an abstraction but as a cognizable reality, the universality within a limitation, but the limitation rarefied enough to reveal to me in deeper measure the nature of the universality of God. The expression is unsatisfactory, but it is as if I had experienced the individuality of God, and the whole experience centers round the sun which, putting it bluntly, I perceive to be the physical vehicle of God whereby He creates, gives, sustains and regenerates life. The sun is, as it were, the countenance of God, the light of which shines upon all things. A little more and I could describe, in so far as description is at all possible, the manner of God's revealing of Himself on this nirvanic plane. Not God unveiled. I cannot see Him unveiled. The part cannot know the whole as whole. But I can't see Him as He interposes a shadow before my eyes. To me that very shadow, iridescent with God, is God, even though but a shadow. I see God in limitation. The part perceives the shadow of the whole. The ocean of Nirvana is a shadow of God. The ocean of every plane is God in shadow. The higher the consciousness, the more is the shadow a true mirror of His being. I realize, too, more vividly the nature of heaven, and somehow it does not seem so absurd to place heaven in the heavens as I had thought. Of course, heaven is a state of consciousness. There are many heavens. Nirvana is a heaven world, infinitely greater than that higher mental plane to which we unusually restrict the title. But is not the blue sky a heaven in special measure? If I free myself from the bondage of earth and body restrictions, and bathe myself in the sky above the clouds, do I not experience a peace and a sense of the all-power, the all-wisdom and the all-love of God, which inevitably decreases as I return to the physical level? I seem also to be able to some extent to apply eternity to the terms of time. Do I not contact in some degree the eternal mind, or, should I say more truly, the cosmic mind, and then cosmic emotions and cosmic physical plane? What is the difference between these cosmic states and their denser counterparts? The first word that comes to me to express the difference is majesty. Mind stripped of all time mentality, of all constituents of the mental plane as we know it. Mind filled with the spiritual counterparts, the archetypes, of the constituents of our mental plane. The cosmic mind is an archetypal mind which reflects itself in the objects of the mental plane. It is not absolute mind, but the nearest approach to absolute mind that I can so far conceive. The positive and the negative, the subject and the object, have disappeared, and there is pure mind, mind without the contrast between I and not I, since the one is merged in the other. The same experience obtains on the plane of the emotions. On this cosmic plane I contact cosmic emotion, which impresses me as being power in motion. I have since often looked at a physical plane storm and have seemed to perceive in it a likeness to the plane of cosmic emotion, always assuming that the physical plane storm is supremely purposeful and for me to great and well-defined ends. Cosmic emotion is power in motion, in spiral swirl, in vast pulsation. Again, as in the case of the cosmic mind, I cease to sense the pairs of opposites. There is no fundamental division of love emotions and hate emotions. They are mutually merged in archetypal emotion. I contact pure emotion, pure feeling, but not absolute emotion or absolute feeling. I sense the difference because I perceive a beyond, though I do not know the nature of that beyond. These two cosmic states are reservoirs which feed their corresponding lower planes, and I see how the pairs of opposites down here emerge from a unity within or above. But I feel sure that this very unity itself is but relative. Further still within or above there is a still deeper unity, compared with which the unity I now contact is a world of diversity. I perceive an apotheosis of death. There is no death, only change, and always change with purpose, change to a greater end. Death is recreation, renewal, the dropping of fetters, the casting aside of a vehicle which has ceased to suffice, the taking off of an overcoat. Death is in very truth a birth into a fuller and larger life, or a deeping down into matter under the law of readjustment. Progress always, and progress towards unity. We come ever nearer to each other and to the real through death. If only we could realize this. I see that death is a form of happiness, and that only our distance from happiness prevents us from realizing the gift of happiness which death confers. We grieve because a friend has gone into the next room, and there seem to be no doors between his room and ours. Yet there are doors, and we might open them if we would and keep them forever afterwards wide open. Grief is ignorance and often selfish. The more we know, the less we shall grieve, for true knowledge is eternal happiness. I turn for a change to myself. I somehow know that my story has undergone, or is undergoing, a process of readjustment. Wherever there is an expansion of consciousness, there is a modification in the aura. What modification is being brought about in my own? It seems as if it were being irradiated with nirvanic light. It has an electric intensity it did not before possess. The colors are in process of rearrangement, apparently in rings like the rings of Saturn. Possibly, indeed probably, this process began before, but the entry into nirvanic consciousness has given it a great impetus. The silver light threads of Nirvana seem to interpenetrate the whole aura, enriching and purifying the colors, and encircling, interpenetrating, my whole being, with a web of light. The aura scintillates with sunlight. The aura sparkles in the sun. I have perceived since these words were written that not only does the aura undergo a light modification, including a rearrangement of the color scheme, but that the music of my being has undergone a beautiful enrichment. I feel myself to be music. True, all is music, and has been from the beginning. But at last I am beginning to understand my music and to be able to watch myself at work in the workshop of sound, assembling the notes I need for the symphony I am dedicated to express. For the sound universe it is my destiny to create. Physical plane Henry Ford assembling a motor car is but a reflection of innumerable spiritual Henry Fords assembling the universes. of which they shall be the sons, in the color workshops, in the sound workshops, in the great laboratory of evolution. The process is at work all the time, but only as we contact Buddhi, and later Nirvana, do we begin really to know what we are doing, and thus to do it more expeditiously and with more effective skill. Each center, there are many centers, glows with the new life and the new promise. Am I in the springtime of a new cosmic year, of which the summer of spiritual maturity is the fifth of the great initiations, to the threshold of which sooner or later I shall come? Conquer this kingdom and you stand on the threshold of the next. The seed of my being has thrust its light shoots through the soils of lower planes, and a bud is opening to the sun in the pure nirvanic air. Someday this bud will become a flower, the flower of earth's humanity in the garden of God. Every root shall grow its bud as it sends up its light shafts through the unreal into the real. As heaven light kisses earth light, the bud takes form and slowly expands into the flower. I seem to see, as this imagery comes to me, the flower of earth's humanity, the Lord Buddha, the flower of indescribable splendor, the radiant lotus form of golden light. Chapter I. The inner light upon outer things. The atom is a sun in miniature in its own universe of the inconceivably minute. Annie Besant and CWLBB. Occult chemistry. As the glow comes before the fire, the dawn before the sunrise, so must the glow of dawning perfection slowly but surely steal over us, body after body, as a sign that the sun within is learning to shine as shines so gloriously the sun without. We need to be set on fire so that we may gradually become one with the fire eternal. We cannot know God as He is until we become all fire, even as He is all fire. Open your hearts, then, to His sunlight, that your whole being may someday burst into flame, and thence into many flames, flames of power, of wisdom, and of love. In each one of us the spark is ready, the spark of divinity waiting to become the fire. Nothing can extinguish this spark, however dimly it may glow. At last the time must come for its emergence into flame, and thence into that fire which till then has slept in the world of the potential. We are set ready for the lighting. Let us concentrate upon ourselves the rays of our Lord the Sun through the burning glass of aspiration and of service, and time, the sure and certain molder of this burning glass, is God's witness that the spark shall thus become the fire. May our service and our aspiration glow with the warmth of understanding, the warmth which stimulates, with the light of wisdom, the wisdom which clarifies, with the burning of power, the burning which purifies. I seem to contact here a note of a great ritual of light, and light the medicine of the future. Light the healer, light the redeemer, the creator, the preserver, the regenerator. The inoculations and drugs of the future will be light variants, and the very food we eat will be concentrated light, the form being used to collect, in varying ways, the sustenance which is the sunlight. But even more than this, is there not a great ceremonial of light, the mystery of light? Not on this globe, perhaps, but on some other more advanced than this earth there is, I think, a mighty magic of the light which someday we shall know and use. I think that is the life of the colony of which Drs. Besant and Bishop led me to write in Man: Whence, How and Whither. Light already begins to play a definite part, but light is in fact the philosopher's stone, the potent force of the alchemist. And someday the science of light will be recognized as the science of sciences, with its laws, its ritual, its worship, its philosophy, its ethic and aesthetic. I wish I had the wisdom to understand even a little of the science, for it is the key to all other sciences. Someday it will be a science intensely applicable even to the little things of everyday life. We shall become in a wonderful way children of light because we are children of the sun, and there will be a Eucharistic service of the light even more glorious, if possible, than the Eucharistic service of our Lord the Christ. I see our Lord the Son distributing himself through his universe, extending himself through its immeasurable distances. I see his world learning gradually to use him in his myriad aspects to meet its many needs. I see these things to be, and I see that our Lord the Sun grows because he shines. He grows by shining. So must we. As we shine so we grow. And as I realize this I turn outwards from the blinding glory of Nirvana to this world of ours living and growing in relative darkness. Light sparks everywhere, glittering and scintillating as do the lights of a seaside town when viewed in the night from passing ships. Light sparks in every kingdom of nature, some dim indeed, feeble, looking as if the slightest breath of adverse wind would blow them out and leave the darkness blacker than ever. But no spark that God has lighted from his divinity can ever fade. Long may it remain feeble, slight may be the change through ages of time, but it grows irresistibly. In each kingdom, sparks there are of more vivid brightness, the jewels, the fruition of the kingdom these. In the human kingdom I perceive that the sparks have become flames, some small, some large. I see that some of these flames are veritable lighthouses, shedding light upon the true pathway of life, warning from the ways of ignorance and pointing towards the pathways of wisdom. They warn from the rocky places and beckon along the channels of rapid growth. These are the world's true benefactors, seers and teachers, themselves on the threshold of those kingdoms beyond the human in which are the mighty fires growing into the semblance of the fire of God. These are the elder brethren of the worlds, veritable pillars of fire upholding the temple of eternity. And all children of our Lord the Sun whose light lighteth all things. Do we not owe all to him? And here once again I compare the Buddhic plane with the Nirvanic, and I strive to distinguish. It is very difficult to express the facts at all accurately. I seem to see in the former an act of coalescence and in the latter an act of identity. I perceive the former to be the assertion, the realization, of unity amidst, above, resolving diversity, while I perceive the latter to be a condition of receding from all diversity, with a consequent readjustment, reconfiguration, rearrangement of the unity, so that it becomes a oneness. Buddha the one with the second, Nirvana the one without a second. Yes, I confirm my previous judgment. And beyond Nirvana, even the one changes, casts aside another of the veils of the real. Can I grope beyond this lowest subplane of Nirvana and look upwards upon the higher rungs of the Nirvanic ladder? No hard and fast divisions, no light tight compartments. Is there not perhaps an intensification of the oneness? For even at the bottom I find that any qualification of the oneness, however true, is a limitation, the negation, of Nirvanic reality. Light, Yes, you can use the word to convey an infinitesimal fraction of the truth. Music, sound. Yes, you can use these words too. But while you are using them, you know that they veil the glory, even the little shaft of glory which is all you yet perceive. But let me drop these veils. What remains all the way up? Oneness, and of this oneness no words may be used. No expression in terms of light or sound or form conveys the slightest real meaning, only a suggestion which points in the direction of the great all. I will meditate on this oneness, live in it. So shall I begin to know it, though not to convey the sense of it. And then shall come that which I can only now describe as transcendence. But I have said enough. I am foolish to strive to measure with words the immeasurable. I see that we evolve under the laws of counterpart and reflection. The world of Nirvana itself is the sublimated counterpart of the world below as much as it is an archetype. The planes above Nirvana are sublimated counterparts, each in its own degree, of the Nirvana below them, the quality and nature of the counterpart being determined by the light vibration quality of the plane. The development of the nirvanic consciousness seems to affect the spirally in the brain, the kundalini, and the various centers generally, as also, of course, the various bodies. I am conscious of a much more intense sensitiveness, of being much more highly strung. I am, as it were, an extremely sensitive plate, rather oversensitive for conditions in the outer world. Probably I shall tone down in due course, but in the earlier stages outer living becomes almost painful. As a matter of fact, in the light of further growth, I do not seem to tone down. On the contrary, the sensitiveness increases steadily. But I have it under increasing self-control, at all events up to a certain point. Life is more difficult from the standpoint of daily contacts, and does not grow less difficult. But to counteract the growing difficulty there is also growing an inner peace which acts, may I descend for a moment into a very material simile, as a wonderful shock absorber. But I realize that the time must come when it will no longer be possible to live in the outer world and maintain the maximum of effectiveness. It is for this reason, for the sake of more generous service, that our elder brethren live away from the haunts of their younger comrades. They prefer to give of their all rather than to have continually to protect themselves against the discords of immaturity, thus using power which otherwise might be free for service. One seems to know people and things far more accurately. They become impressed upon me as they are, rather than as they seem to be. It would seem that as the causal body disintegrates when the individual enters the Buddhic plane, so is it with the Buddhic vehicle as one enters the nirvanic plane. This seems inevitable on what I call the plane of apotheosis, the essential plane, the fundamental archetype. I notice that I do not write archetypes, and the reason seems to be that from one point of view there is no plurality on the nirvanic plane. Plurality begins on the plane below, and even there it is plurality overshadowed, dominated, by unity. Of course, as one descends, the various bodies of lower planes are reformed out of the matter of the planes according to the vibration rate of the permanent atom. Return from nirvana, and the Buddhic vehicle is instantaneously formed. Return from the Buddhic plane, and a causal body is immediately ready for use, though not, of course, the age-long friend which reintegrates no more. Why cannot anyone enter Nirvana? It is a question of time, of course, and a question as to how the time is occupied. Entry into Nirvana involves an expansion of consciousness, and the lesser expansions must precede the greater. It seems to be a matter of sense of reality. It is not enough to know what is called truth. One must know something of what is truth, which is generally quite another matter, and the truth of things cannot be learned from books or speeches, except in part. These help, as does also experience. But in some way one must not only discover truth through experience, but also through our reaching out into that which is beyond experience, gradually making experience of that beyond. Similes come into my mind. Think of one of those curious puzzle pictures which they give to children. Each puzzle has a title, and one works to that. This piece fits in here. That piece fits in there. Gradually the picture forms and becomes complete. So is it with life, and with the various planes of consciousness. For example, an individual entering into Buddhic consciousness obtains a general idea of Buddhic principles, and gradually the experience fulfills the principles, so that they become built into his very being. The Buddhic picture becomes well recognizable. Buddhi has ceased to be that which it was at first, an empty circle, an unexplored vastness. He has traveled throughout the Buddhic world, has populated the circle, the vastness, with experience after experience at ascending levels, until he reaches the summit and looks up to new planes, or planes of being leading to mightier summits still. The individual is ready, therefore, for another picture, that of Nirvana. But one cannot begin on another picture until the former is on the road to completion. It is no doubt possible to imagine the stages ahead, and the effort is very useful and helpful. But one must be strenuously working at the pictures one has already in hand, deliberately and with the realization that in each case the principles must be fulfilled in practice. The physical body picture, the emotions picture, the mind picture, all must be on the road to completion, and each of us who reaches this stage must be hard at work on them all. Then only is it possible for us to be allowed to begin something still further. We speak of theosophizing our lives. The word theosophizing covers our duty, be the center of consciousness where it may. But at each stage we must build into our lives the essence of our highest achievement. If the causal body is the highest active principle, we must see to it that we are in all things true to the experiences of which the causal body is the custodian. We must live from that body. If Buddhi has been contacted, we must see to it that the spirit of that unity ensouls each thought, each feeling, each word, each deed. So with Nirvana, and so beyond and beyond. And we must remember that nothing short of truth suffices. Our conception of truth is not enough, however good it may be, however useful to us it may be. Facts, not theories, are required. Not, perhaps, absolute fact. That is still beyond us. But relatively pure facts, at all events. I seem to see the water of the emotions fructifying the seed of the mind so that it bursts into being. Similarly I see the water of the mind fructifying Buddhi, and the water of Buddhi fructifying the nirvanic seed. But the water must be pure, otherwise the seed remains potential. When the potential within the seed becomes active, it sends out light rays of its own quality which contact, summon to its aid, the corresponding rays of light without, and another light body is in course of formation. Up till that time the light rays from without passed through the vehicle, hardly, if at all, affecting it. But now they find response to their stimuli, and in interaction the light body comes into being. I have for some time been striving to bring down into the physical brain the means whereby translation takes place into this new field of consciousness, Nirvana. So far as I can contact the process, it depends upon the capacity to respond on the part of the embryonic atom of nirvanic consciousness within myself. I seem to notice that these embryonic counterparts of the corresponding conditions without pass through stages of what I must call prenatal development, the birth into consciousness synchronizing with an expansion of consciousness which is the veritable initiation itself. There is a period of sleep, unconsciousness. There is a period of stirring, restlessness, the dawn of consciousness. Then there is a period of awareness, something less than awakening, yet a capacity intermittently to vibrate to corresponding conditions without. And finally there is the awakening itself, when the embryonic atom is not merely a nucleus, an embryo, but a vehicle, a body. The sun shines, and takes unto himself the world, the universe. This is initiation. I presume that at the fourth of the great initiations the stirring of the life within the nirvanic atom, due to Buddhic and other impacts, is marvelously vitalized from without by a treat act of unification on the part of the one initiator or his deputy. A great expansion takes place. The vehicle is formed whereby entry is gained into the kingdom now to be conquered. I take my abode for the first time in a nirvanic vehicle, if the word vehicle be permitted, and now the task is mine to develop the senses of this new potency, just as a little child has to learn to use his senses in the physical world. Light, of course, is the first discovery, for it is the primary, overwhelming experience. I have spoken of lightning standing still. Entry into the nirvanic world is as into lightning, blinding, penetrating, drenching. One plunges into a sea of vibrant, vocal lightning. One cannot sink, but one has to learn to swim. One does not sink, because the light within makes one buoyant. It is impossible to conceive entry into this kingdom without the warrant of the awakened light within. But were such a conception possible, I realize that the only result would be annihilation. And this shows me the relatively irresistible power of this lightning light. I have striven to describe its glorious beauty. I might now try to describe its awful power. Scientists speak of the mighty power within the atom, and of the tremendous consequences could it be released. God tempers the light, or we should be destroyed. Only as self-control grows stronger, and the path of purification is trodden with ever more rapid and firmer footsteps, are potentialities released within ourselves, the negative within uniting with the positive without. At this point I have since noticed that this resurrection into the lightning standing still has been preceded by the vigil of a crucifixion. The crucifixion and the resurrection, therefore, are the interdependent constituents of the epoch of the fourth of the great initiations, the resurrection unsafe without the crucifixion. And to this end are there not indeed at every stage of life these twins of crucifixion and resurrection? Do you not know innumerable crucifixions, innumerable resurrections, some great, some small, some tremendous, some insignificant? Are not crucifixions and resurrections distributed throughout life, in every kingdom of nature? And are they not heralds of the supreme crucifixion and resurrection in the human kingdom, typified by this fourth stage on the path of holiness, at which takes place the crucifixion of selfishness, the utter subordination of the lower, the offering of all one is in the service of all that lives, and the consequent resurrection into power, power that may now be grasped because it can only be used to the glory of God and in the service of His worlds. I look upon those who have achieved the resurrection and I perceive the justificatory crucifixions. Crucifixions none the less real and effective though some who have gone through them have been conscious of no suffering. I would venture to deny that suffering is an inevitable concomitant of crucifixion, or at least of the final crucifixion in the human kingdom. It is often present, but it need not be. It is not suffering that is indispensable, but offering, holding nothing back. I find, then, that the capacity, aroused in the course of the ceremony of the fourth of the great initiations, to respond to nirvanic consciousness, opens to me this new kingdom. If I am correctly describing the actual process of entry, I can only suggest that it is a matter of setting up, or rather intensifying, certain potentialities of vibration, so that all that vibrates differently falls away, or at least goes out of perspective. Do these other rates of vibration, which we may call the lower bodies, either retire into a kind of body formula or, if they remain actually corporeal, do they lose for the time practically all save the elemental life? I start vibrating at the nirvanic rate, and find myself in the nirvanic consciousness. I sound the nirvanic note, which I heard definitely for the first time during the course of the initiation, though an echo of it may have come to me now and then before, and the portals open to my summoning. I shall soon find, indeed, I am beginning now to find, that it is not in the least necessary to be physically asleep in order to contact this consciousness. It may be contacted in full waking consciousness, and I am now striving to learn to do that. But if I try to examine this further step, I seem to be using the physical brain in a new way, or through new brain channels. Part of the process consists in getting temporarily out of focus, out of perspective, so far as lower planes are concerned, but this is done as in a flash. As the experience grows, even this stage of getting out of focus is hardly noticeable. The only simile at all appropriate is that of the jellyfish which breathes in and out, so that its body opens out and withdraws, expands and contracts. This is what seems to take place as one uses nirvanic consciousness. One expands to outer things, contacts them in all their parts, interpenetrates them. This is how the oneness is experienced. Can you follow me when I describe my consciousness unfolding and contacting outer things? On every plane of consciousness this can and must be done, so that one contacts buddhically, nirvanically, and so on. Being very infantile in this new world, I find it difficult to hold the ordinary waking consciousness simultaneously with the nirvanic. I notice a tendency to drop off to sleep, to get out of the physical body. One curious effect is that I seem to see the word does not at all suit with the whole of myself, and not with any one organ. It is more contact than perception, more attitude than sight. This is the method of all planes except the physical. It is so even in astral consciousness, but it becomes more noticeable as one rises higher. And at these superior levels one learns to see every object or entity from within as well as from outside, to see it as part of oneself, or rather of the great self in which one is now merged. This is what our author expresses in his next paragraph. CWL. I observe that nirvanic consciousness is not a consciousness apart. It is in the supreme degree one with the world in which we live. It is all-penetrating, and in its light there is a marvelous readjustment to reality for everything. A similar readjustment happened in a lesser degree in the case of the lower stages, and I perceive the great expansions of consciousness which mark the dividing lines between the kingdoms of nature to be similar readjustments to reality. There is nothing in the world not amenable to the light of Nirvana, for in it things are perceived infinitely more as they are than as they seem to be. The light of Nirvana is as a great tuning fork. External objects, human and non-human, vibrate more or less in accord. Hence it becomes far more possible for one who has heard the nirvanic sound to gauge the relation between the things of the outer worlds and the nirvanic real. Either they ring true, or not true, less real, or more real. In any case, there is unbroken relationship between all planes of consciousness. Below is a reflection, the shadow, of the above. That there is distortion is obvious, but this is because the lower has not yet learned to reflect, within the measure of its capacity, perfectly. With increasing density is increasing limitation, yet on every plane the limitation must gradually conform to the minimum rather than to that maximum density with which it began. This brings me to a point which strikes me as of considerable importance. I perceive that the doctrine of transubstantiation is not merely the truth in relation to the ceremony of the Holy Eucharist, but one of the great laws of nature, one of the great processes of evolution. I perceive that all growth is in large measure a process of transubstantiation, not necessarily the abandonment of the lower, but rather the substitution, in increasing measure, of the more real for the less real as the motive power behind or within, or shall I say the disclosure, in increasing measure, of the substance, of the essence, as the life of all the shadowing forms. Taking nirvanic consciousness as an example, I seem to perceive that in my own being a process of transubstantiation has taken place. I still live in the outer world, and go through the routine of daily life. I think, I feel, I act, I speak. I use the senses of my various bodies. To outward appearances I am not at all changed. I am as much recognizable as George Arundale as ever, and the mere superficial observer will detect no changes. Yet the transubstantiation has taken place, the old background has given way to, has become merged in, the new background. The greater reality has been substituted for a lesser reality as the ensouling power of my being. In the case of the bread and the wine of the Eucharist, there appears no change of outer form. Yet a consecration causes in each the substitution of the Christ principle for the lower principles normal to these two substances. The supreme reality has been substituted for a relatively insignificant reality. The unity of all life makes this possible, and indeed not merely possible but inevitable. The whole of life is a process of gradual transubstantiation, and in the Holy Eucharist we are given a striking reminder of this essential fact. Unfortunately, we do not generally realize that the ceremony of the Eucharist is an epitome of the whole ceremony of life. Life is a constant process of substitution and transubstantiation, these being specially marked and sharply defined at every one of the great stages on the path of holiness. The expansion of consciousness that takes place at each of the great initiations is nothing less than a transubstantiation, and the same is true of all lesser expansions of consciousness. But in each case the earlier transubstantiation must be fulfilled ere a deeper transubstantiation can take its place, leaving it potential but merged, as the lesser merges in the greater. I notice in myself many interesting effects of the transubstantiation connected with the awakening of nirvanic consciousness. I notice, for instance, the great clarification of issues. Many problems in life cease to be problems, the solution of them is obvious. Many things which I go on doing I do differently, or with other intent. The whole of daily life becomes, or is to become, an offering to the newly realized higher. Daily life must forsake the lesser gods for the newly perceived greater gods. At various stages in my existence I have been living as unto this, that or the other standard. I may have been living as unto myself, my lower self. I may have been living as unto men, or as unto a code or creed. Now I must live as unto something beyond. Perhaps, to some small extent, I have all the while been living as unto the Lord, very haltingly and feebly of course. But now I must live as unto him less haltingly and feebly because he is condescended to enter more closely into relationship with me through a veritable process of transubstantiation, which is the same as saying a process of self-realization. Chapter IV. The Meditation in the Himalayas. Northwards soared the stainless ramps of huge Himalaya's wall, ranged in white ranks against the blue, untrod, infinite, wonderful, whose uplands vast, and lifted universe of crest and crag, shoulder and shelf, green slope and icy horn, riven ravine, and splintered precipice led climbing thought higher and higher, until it seemed to stand in heaven and speak with gods. Beneath the snow-dark forest spread, sharp-placed with leaping cataracts and veiled with clouds lower grew rose oaks and the great fir groves where echoed pheasants' call and panthers' cry, clatter of wild sheep on the stones, and scream of circling eagles. Under these the plain gleamed like a praying carpet at the foot of those divinest altars. The light of Asia, the clarification of issues to which I have referred above, finds valuable expression in the bringing into relief of those shadows in my nature which have yet to yield to the light. I know myself, I think, as never have I known myself before, and while I am appalled at my ignorance, my thirst for knowledge, or rather for truth, is immensely increased. Were this not so, I might well despair, for what I know is of the size of the minutest speck of dust as compared with the mighty earth. How little I really know! It is no exaggeration, indeed, to say that I know nothing. At best I have a few scraggy hypotheses, some, I trust, founded on that reality which is the essence of my being. But how much there is to know, and how glorious the search, One feels like an enthusiastic collector of gems, glorying in the searching and triumphing in the finding. Never satisfied, but eagerly hoping, and though never satisfied, still utterly content, for there is so much to do with what one has. And there is this advantage over the collector. There is nothing in the world, or out of it, that is not worth collecting. There is nothing which is not valuable experience. There is nothing which does not contain a useful lesson. So the circumstances of life are of little importance. What matters is our power to extract from them the nectar whereby we grow, the aqua vitae,